So in this video I'm going to talk a bit about some of my favourite restoration products, mainly rust treatments, primers, paints and a few other miscellaneous ones thrown in for good measure. This is in no way scientific and will be quite a rough and ready video. I've literally just taken a selection off the shelf and started rambling about them. When I first started out with car restoration, the whole subject of rust and paint products seemed like a minefield, but now with a load of money spent and several years experience, here are some products and thoughts on them. I hope you find this useful. Before I start though, I just want to share a thought. One of the challenges for the home restorer is how to address rust. A purist car restoration approach would be to cut out and remove all rust present in a vehicle. However, for most people this is not realistic. If that approach were taken to my R107 for example, there would be little of the car left. The important thing for me is whether material has been structurally compromised. If the strength is gone, then obviously it has to be cut out and new metal welded in. However, where rust has not yet reached this point, there are a multitude of products that can assist in the treatment and stabilisation of that corrosion, saving costly repairs in the future. So starting with the rust removers and converters, I've tried various rust removers. They generally fall into categories of either phosphoric acid based ones or other ones that use other formulas that maybe non-acidic or may use citric acid or something like that. Probably my go-to one at the moment is Jenolite, which is a phosphoric acid one. This is the concentrated jelly formula. My experience with the rust removers has generally been that the ones in pure liquid form are better for just immersing rusty bolts and things like that in. They don't really seem to do a huge amount on kind of rusty surfaces, particularly vertical surfaces. You really need something that's more of a gel. The reason I like Jenolite is that it seems to work fairly quickly. It doesn't need long periods of time where you've got to sort of check it for rusting, for drying out, etc. So that's kind of my go-to one at the moment. As far as the converters are concerned, Rustbusters FE123 and also Dinitrol's RC900 are kind of my favourites at the moment. I know a lot of people kind of rubbish rust converters because of course a lot of the time all they do is just sort of convert the very surface of the material where there's still maybe a ton of rust underneath, and of course the moment that converted surface gets flaked off or whatever, then the rust can break through again. But if you are going to use a rust converter, these two are probably some of the better ones. The particular reason I liked the RC900 is that it's a spray, so that's kind of good. You'll also see me using the so-called rust encapsulator sometimes. Personally, as much as I do like this product, I don't always see the point of it. If you've removed or converted rust sufficiently, either mechanically or chemically, as long as the surface is fairly stable, in my opinion, you're probably better off just putting down a 2K epoxy primer to seal the surface. I'm not sure what advantage over that route the rust encapsulator really gives you, but I'm open to persuasion on that. So I tend not to use this so much unless I'm using it for cavities and things like that, and generally for cavities I tend to go for the internal frame coating, which is kind of, as far as I can tell, in Eastwood's product lineup, the internal frame coating is kind of a cross between the rust encapsulator and their kind of fast etch rust remover, insofar as it kind of encapsulates, but it kind of also, using the acid, kind of chemically bonds to the kind of rusty surface. Also, the surface with internal frame coating doesn't really have to be rusty either. Like I'll use it on clean metal as well, just to get some protection to the inside of cavities that otherwise you couldn't necessarily reach. The only thing about this is that I know Eastwood do recommend it be reapplied, and I think for chassis frames and things like that, that's fine. You've just got to be a bit careful because it does go everywhere. It will come out of any little gap in a seam or anything like that, and if you're, you know, don't get it anywhere near body paint because it will potentially damage it. So another rust remover product I've tried is this Buildhamburg DX gel stuff. It's a non-acidic formula. I'm not quite sure what it uses, but it's not phosphoric acid, so it's arguably better for the environment. It's very thick stuff, so it clings to surfaces well, particularly vertical ones, and you can leave it and it'll work away there. But it does have quite long application periods, so they recommend you leave it for 24 to 48 hours, and it's critical that you don't let it dry out. So the best thing to do is to cover it in cling film or something like that. I don't find it the most practical product, therefore, for kind of more tactical work, but it's pretty good. So certainly for the primers, as primers go, I think you can't beat, particularly for areas that aren't on the outside panels of the car, you can't beat, you know, a nice thick 2K epoxy primer. It's just the best thing for a prepared surface. When you're doing welding, though, if you are going to use a weld-through primer, and I know this subject sort of generates a certain amount of debate, I found the Frost weld-through to be a very good product. I'm sometimes a bit concerned about its adhesion, but I've never had any issues really with penetration. This stuff, the Indasa zinc weld, which I got from Rustbusters, almost seems to have the opposite issue with it, insofar as the adhesion seems to be better perhaps in the Frost products, but it tends to go on a bit thicker, and I think the last time I tried to use it, it went on a bit too thick and was starting to affect the penetration a bit. I'm still kind of feeling my way with these guys, to be honest, and whether or not you really need weld-through primer is a sort of a subject of debate. I know. Kind of a special mention here. I'm not really using this too much on the R107 for heavy restoration products, but if you are just looking for like a general good high build primer that you can get off the shelf in Halfords and will kind of do quite a nice job, Upol's number 5 is pretty good. It lays down really nicely as far as I can tell, and with several coats will fill, you know, I forget what the exact scratch grit it'll fill, but it's reasonably low, so I quite like it. So for sort of small like 1K work, I think Jenolite Anti-Rust primer is pretty good actually. If you've sort of got a surface that's maybe still rusty but is essentially stable, this stuff is pretty good for just sort of sealing it up. It's kind of probably similar actually to some of the sort of Hammerite products and things, but you know, horses for courses really. It sort of seems to work quite well. So I think Rustbusters Custom421 primer is probably going to be my 2K go-to primer for certainly the underside and all areas of the car that are not the outer body panels. It just seems to be like aimed at people like me, i.e. restoring a car in a garage where certain repairs are going to be in primer for long periods of time and you're not in a controlled environment. There may be moisture around, whatever it is. It's just a product that fits the bill in that regard. I don't know how different it actually is from other 2K epoxy primers. Obviously, the fact that it's an epoxy primer is the key thing here, but I had a go with it on the inner wheel arch repair the other day. It seemed to work really well. It's nice and thick, easy to mix up. So I think unless something goes wrong with it in the future, that is going to be what most of the underside of the car and chassis rails and things like that is going to be treated with. Similarly, Eastwood's 2K products, I used some of their 2K gloss lacquer over the summer on something else. I was really impressed with the finish, and to be honest, with a bit of buffing, it pretty much looked like a body shop 2K spray gun finish, so I was very pleased with that. I've no reason to believe that either the chassis black, or I've also got some of their epoxy primer here. Now, I've been debating what to use the epoxy primer for, because certainly on areas of the car that aren't, you know, the body panels, my preference is very much to use, you know, a hand mix 2K primer with a brush or roller. But I'm sure there will be an occasion where I maybe want to spray some 2K epoxy, and assuming it's a not excessive area, then this will be my go-to product for that. So I have become a fan. Eastwood got me into this sort of thing of 2K aerosol cans. Now, it is potentially quite an expensive way of painting things, but I got these made up from a chap in Ireland called Vinny Byrne. Came very quickly. I haven't actually tried them yet, but these are supposedly the custom color lapis blue of the Mercedes, and I'm planning to use these when I paint the inner wings, basically body color. I'm planning to use these. I think it'll just give me a little bit more control than possibly with the spray gun, and also I don't have to mix and stuff like that. And as long as you've got a big enough area to justify firing off one of these cans, because obviously once you've activated them, they only last for 24 or 48 hours. I think this is a really good way of painting in a kind of simple way that doesn't involve, you know, the compressor and all the mess of mixing up and having to clean the gun, etc, etc. So I haven't tried them yet, but I have high hopes. As chassis paints go, I quite like the Frost stuff. The Eastwood stuff is good. It's all a bit of a muchness, but certainly if you're just looking for a good general gloss chassis paint just to go on under bits of the car or chassis or whatever, as a 1K product goes, this is pretty good. So general body fillers, I find Upol Fantastic is fine for most body panel work. Similarly for fiberglass repairs, P40, I rarely use the P40 stuff. I know there are better fiberglass fillers out of there, but for the occasional use to cover a hole on a cosmetic part or something like that, I find actually P40 does the job just fine. So Dinitrol 6030, which is an aluminiumized body filler. I've just started using it. It seems like really good stuff. I don't know if metal impregnated fillers are a bit of a gimmick. I just have no idea, but I like the way it went down, hardened off, easy to sand. Just seems like it might have a bit of an advantage over a conventional filler. So as far as sealants and adhesives are, I started using Sikaflex 221 on the Range Rover Classic. It's pretty good because it's kind of a cross between a seam sealer and an adhesive sealant. So it's really hard. It remains flexible though. I love the stuff. So slightly random this one. I know it's not a body or rust product, but this is Blaster's penetrating catalyst. It kind of is a rust product actually, because it kind of, you know, if you've got a bolt or something like that that needs penetrating with fluid to free it, for example, this seems pretty good. Like Blaster aren't really in Europe as far as I can tell, but I did find this on Amazon. They have a selection of other anti-rust or rust, you know, prevention products that they sell in the US. But this I find it's heavier duty stuff than WD-40 or something like that. So I quite like it as a product. It also has quite a, you know, it comes in quite a nice weighty can with a nice kind of trigger action and everything. So another Eastwood product, pre-painting prep is my kind of go-to panel wipe. Yeah, it's not the most industrial of degreasers you can get, but for general sort of, again, bodywork where the surface is reasonably, you know, clean, but you just need to make sure that kind of sanding debris and everything like that is gone. I find spraying this down, going over with a microfiber cloth and then a dry tack rag is good for 95% of the applications that I need it for. This is kind of a bit random and silly, but one of my constant frustrations is like seam sealer and stuff that comes in those canisters that you then put in a caulking gun. I'm forever struggling to seal up the tip of the gun. So what I did is I just bought one of these like 10 packs of disposable ends for caulking guns, and they just have a little plastic tip on the end which you just stick on the end and stops them drying out. Don't know how effective they actually are. I haven't really tried them yet, but they seem like a really neat concept. Whereas, you know, you've just been using like the 3M or something, and you're trying to like put a plastic bag over the end of it and tape it up, it all just gets a bit sort of messy, whereas these like seem like a really cheap and simple solution to the problem. So thank you for listening. I hope you found that useful, or at least thought-provoking. I'm certainly not wedded to any of these products, so if you know of any better alternatives, or perhaps products that I may not have thought of, then do let me know in the comments. I'll put a list of the major items that I mentioned this in the description so that people can find them. I'm planning to do a video in the future on all the kind of tools and things in my restoration armoury that I find most useful. But for now, if you like this video, do like and subscribe.